Good afternoon. So today's seminar or webinar is about divorce in the time of the coronavirus and tips for keeping it together in these stressful times. What's happening right now, as we all know, is completely unprecedented. No one could have ever predicted that this would be happening. The Corona Epidemic is playing out in ways none of us ever thought possible. And what we are finding in our practice is that the financial and emotional toll on many families, whether they are families that are intact families or families that have gone through divorce and or separated or share children together and co-parent, is enormous. The country is essentially under a stay-at-home guideline until at least April 30th. That means that many children will be at home from school for weeks, if not months. It likely means that many children will not be attending childcare or even summer camp, possibly, for the summer. I know that I have spoken to people about this issue already, and it seems like that's a very real possibility. People in many professions are working from home or, unfortunately, losing jobs. We at Miller, Zeiderman, and Whitaker are working from our homes remotely, working with our clients essentially, and working as well as we can with computers and Zoom and Skype. Some worry that the economy will not bounce back for some time. And we on a daily basis are fielding calls about how to keep the children out of the fray of litigation and marital strife, and frankly, how to deal with custody issues that are arising because people are either in the house altogether, and there are custody issues that are arising because temperatures, while maybe rising, unfortunately, of the fever, they are also rising because people are in smaller quarters and even quarantined. People are frightened and stressed. And so therefore, it is even more critical to keep calm in the household. We have told people to be steady. We have told people that they need to be reasonable and flexible. And one of the big issues that we are facing is how people co-parent during this time of extreme anxiety. People want to make sure that they are going to continue to foster a relationship between the children and their other parent. And they also want to make sure that their children are safe. And they also want to make sure that everyone is doing, who is in the children's lives, taking the precautions that are necessary to keep both the children and both parents safe. And while doing this, it's going to be very important that you strive to be the best co-parent that you can be. Watching your tone as you address your ex-spouse or the father or mother of your child, and doing the best that you can to rise above any provocations or placing your children in the middle is going to be even more difficult, but it's going to be necessary because we've got a long road ahead of us. And placing your children first and foremost and keeping them safe both physically and psychologically has to be first and foremost for everyone. One of the things that we are telling our clients is that they need to be very transparent with the other parent, where they are located, where the child is staying, who is watching the child, particularly as people are quarantined or self-isolating. That means likely not traveling, certainly by car or by plane, and certainly not without notifying the other parent ahead of time and consulting with the other parent about making these trips. So we've had all sorts of issues this week. We've had people who are in California who won't come home, people who are in Florida who won't come home with their children. People who started the spring break in one place and now won't end that spring break because they feel that they are afraid to come back to major cities such as New York. That being said, when these people are making these decisions as to whether or not to come back, particularly when there's a court order, they should be doing so in conjunction with the other parent. They can't just make unilateral decisions. That may mean going back and forth and having more communication than ever before, but it's important that everyone end up on the same page. Otherwise, there's a court order to follow, and that's really what should happen. That means that everyone has to communicate. This means that communicating more than you usually do about your children, about their medical needs, about their emotional needs, about their homeschooling is going to be more critical than ever. The goal is to make sure to involve the other parent, to co-parent, no matter what. That means the simple things like exchanging passwords for homeschooling network, to exchange homework when a child goes back and forth, to make sure that the other parent is aware of tests. So for example, if tests are occurring on Friday and your exchange is on Wednesday, you might need to tell the other parent that, making sure that projects are done, making sure that you communicate with the other parent if your child has been exposed. So for example, we live in a big city, and sometimes people in buildings are exposed. You need to make sure the other parent is knowledgeable about that, because that child, unfortunately, while healthy, may also be carrying the virus. And so the exchange is very important, that it be safe, and that it be safe for elderly people, that it be safe for the other people in the other parent's household and in your household. Again, the goal is to make sure that you involve the other parent in these discussions, that you communicate, and that you co-parent. Be aware that court orders are still in effect. That's very important. People seem to for some reason, not understand that these court orders are still court orders, and that you have to be sure to abide by these court orders as to access, phone and FaceTime, and other forms of access. Now, that doesn't mean not to be flexible. So, I have clients who call me and say, well, should I have the other parent have additional FaceTime? And yes, if it makes everybody more comfortable, have an additional FaceTime, have an additional phone access. It's very important that everyone feel comfortable during this time, that the kids feel comfortable, that the parents feel comfortable. Again, it's about flexibility, it's about transparency, it's about reasonableness. The new school schedule and the medical situation may call for changes. That means that a schedule may, although there's a court order, and although I just said the court orders are in effect, it may be a good time to work with the other parent to make sure that if, for example, a child's homework schedule or their school schedule starts at a particular time so as not to disrupt the day for the school schedule, you might do your pickup and your drop off at a different time. That's okay if both of you can be on the same page. Reasonableness should prevail. And if in doubt, the best way to determine what's reasonable, what's a good thing to do, is to figure out what's really in your child's best interest. What are the things that someone would really think about for your child's best interest? So again, I'm going to say you need to be respectful of the other parent, even if before you really weren't feeling that the other parent was doing a great job, or that the other parent wasn't working with you, or that the other parent was difficult in some ways. This is an opportunity, perhaps, that we may never have again, hopefully, to mend fences, to work with your other parent, to see if you can resolve things. I've seen miraculous things happen in the last week I'm going to share. I've had people who have decided to work together and have come to resolutions that I never thought possible, where parents are living all in one house, for example, that have been apart for years, so as to make it easier for the children, who are sharing vacation homes, who are sharing their own home with the other parent. Now, again, it's important to maintain boundaries, so I'm not suggesting that these are for everyone, that these are the rules of the road for everyone. But I think the rules of the road are respect, reasonableness, flexibility, communication, and co-parenting. Does anybody have any questions?
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I'll remind everyone, if you have a question, you can email info@savvyladies.org, or you can also type your question into the chat box here. And I see that we have a question which is asking, my ex-spouse was just furloughed and I obtained child support through his paycheck. How can I continue to get my monthly payment from him if he's not making any income? And we don't have a good relationship.
So the courts are closed for the most part. Certainly in New York, where I am, they are closed. And if he isn't making payments and you're not able to get payments, then you may have to reach out by email or text. And although you don't have a good relationship, try to work this out in some way. If there is just no money coming in and he has no source, you may need to ask him to borrow monies. You may need to borrow monies. You may need to apply for whatever aid you can apply for to get through this time. It depends on what his resources might be in terms of payment. But keep in mind, again, it's about working together. And although the relationship may have been poor to bad, frankly, it's going to be important to see if the two of you can work together so that you can provide for your child. And when the courts open again, then you'll need to make whatever application you make. This is going to hit a lot of people in terms of work. And so there is going to be a lot of fallout here. And aid is going to be very important. And it may be welfare.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Lisa. Another question that we just got is, I've made sure that my son is set up for school while he has to do it remotely with me. I've explained it to my ex-husband, but is there a way that I can be sure that he's following through with it and my son is getting the education that he needs?
So I think that you can ask your son's parent if he is indeed doing this, and maybe ask your son about what he learned. What did he learn yesterday? Or how was school? Or what things did he go over? And if there is a portal of some sort or a teacher to contact, you might email the teacher and just say, I wanted to see how it's going. I wanted to make sure that everything is going well. We want to be on board, and copy your son's parent on that email and make sure that everybody is on board. As long as you've shared the passwords and you've done your part, I don't think there's anything more that you could do. Hopefully your son's parent will also want to parent correctly and to make sure that this is done. One thing that I've said to many people is, when this is all over, there's going to be people who haven't done the best for their children, and there may end up being modifications of custody as a result of that. And so everybody really should be on board in terms of doing the right thing, because there will be a reckoning at some point for all of this if you aren't doing the right thing, or if your son's parent is not doing the right thing.
Okay, great, thanks. This next question that we have is a two-part question, so I'll read you the whole thing, and then you can kind of do part 1 and 2. But the question is asking, what advice do you have when an ex won't exercise reasonableness, flexibility, and the child's best interest now? For example, his girlfriend sometimes cohabitates while our child is there. And then the second part of the question is, do you think it's best that children go back and forth during this time? Isn't that exposing them and everyone to risk, given all of the contact?
Okay, so I'm going to answer the second part first because the second part is a little bit easier, and I might have some questions. We might need to go back a little bit and find out a little bit more about what the circumstances with the girlfriend are. So I do think children should go back and forth. I think that the children deserve both parents, and I think that the two of you can decide that you're both going to abide by the regulations that are put out by the government as to keeping everyone safe. If for some reason you don't believe that's happening, then you need to address that with your co-parent, and you need to point out what the issues are. And we have had this issue recently, many times actually this week, where certain parents aren't taking the proper precautions and are not keeping the children safe and are not communicating about it. But generally, the children should go back and forth as long as nobody has the symptoms. If someone has the symptoms, it's my understanding, and we've advised our clients that they should be quarantining for the period of time that the government is telling them to quarantine for. And the children should then be having FaceTime or Skype with the other parent as long as the other parent is up for it. But I do believe, and that goes back to whether there's a court order or even if there's not, the children should be going back and forth between the two households. Again, making sure that everyone is following the precautions that they should be following as put out by the government in terms of safety. As for the girlfriend, so is this something that is new, or is this girlfriend somebody who is going to be taking the proper precautions? That's really the question. So if the girlfriend lives in, then that's a different issue. The question really becomes whether the girlfriend is taking the proper precautions. If the girlfriend is someone who's going to go out and be not social distancing and then coming back and exposing your child, then I think that you need to have that conversation or that email or that text with the other parent and say this isn't working, and perhaps our child should just stay with us right now or with me right now because your girlfriend is not social distancing. And if your girlfriend is not social distancing properly, then you're exposing not only our child, but you're also exposing my household. And so if you put that into a text, and you can say either your girlfriend needs to social distance and you need to assure me of that, or if your girlfriend is not social distancing, your girlfriend needs to leave for now and we need to co-parent our child, or I may not actually send our child if your girlfriend is there and not social distancing, and we'll have to deal with that with the court when they come online. I hope that answers the question.
I believe so, and I just saw in the chat that the follow-up is it's a brand new girlfriend and she doesn't live in, and he won't share info about her.
Okay, so then I think if it was me, okay, and every court's going to be different. So this is a test really as to reasonableness, right, and transparency. And I think as to transparency, you need to say, these are times when they are unprecedented, and this would be in a text. I would do this in a text or an email. And these are unprecedented times. I've asked about the details of your girlfriend. It's not appropriate that you're not telling me how she social distances. And if you can't give me the details and assure me that she is social distancing, then I suggest that we not exchange our child right now, and instead you FaceTime, and we will give you makeup time when we are all through this, or when you can tell me for certain that your girlfriend is either not there or is social distancing, and what precautions you've taken to make sure of this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that is great advice, and I'm sure that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, yes, and I'm just seeing in the chat a message of thank you. Do you have time for one more question, Lisa?
Absolutely, I'm good.
Okay, so this next question is asking can you offer any advice for those where one co-parent is incredibly difficult and not playing ball at all, for example, not communicating, not being conscious to the child's best interest, and generally not following the agreed rules? What steps should a parent take in this situation since courts are closed?
So it depends what the rules are that the person's not following. If it's a question of health and safety, true health and safety, then you may have to do what I suggested before to the other person, which is to basically say, we can't have access like this, and to document what the specific issues are in a text, and to be very firm about the fact that we need to have transparency. Another thing, by the way, and this actually applies to the last caller, I'm just going to go back, is to ask your pediatrician advice. So if there's a safety or health concern, and I'm kind of going backwards in a bit, but I'll pick it up again. If there's a safety or health concern about not social distancing, or not being transparent, or not taking the proper precautions, another thing to do is to suggest with your other parent that you call the pediatrician and find out what the pediatrician recommends. And perhaps the pediatrician can get some more details, and then to agree ahead of time that you're going to follow the protocols by the pediatrician. So that would go for this particular question also. If there are particular issues that are health related, then get your pediatrician involved, and follow the protocols that agree in ahead of time that you're going to follow the protocols of the pediatrician, and get on the phone, both of you together. If that is not something that can be done, then make sure that you're documenting with emails and texts, asking the questions. And if you're not getting satisfactory answers that you feel like your child is being protected health-wise, then you may have to unfortunately say, you know what, we're going to curtail access at this time, and we're going to do FaceTime and Skype until you can be more transparent and until you can assure me that you're doing this. That doesn't mean, by the way, that you can unilaterally just determine things, that visitation is over or that access is over. You have to use reasonableness. So you have to think to yourself, what is a judge going to think about this later? What is a judge going to think if I curtailed access? Is a judge going to say I shouldn't have done that? Or is a judge going to say under the circumstances it was reasonable because the other parent wasn't communicating? You have to use good judgment here. It's about judgment and about a lot of documentation in terms of text, in terms of emails, and if you have an attorney, reaching out to your attorney, of course. As I said, a pediatrician. If there is a therapist for the child, reaching out to the child's therapist might also be a good way to deal with some of these issues. Or some people sometimes have what's called a parent coordinator who works out these kinds of issues. That would be another way to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Lisa, I'm seeing a comment in the chat here that I wanted to share with you that says, a number of co-parenting couples I've heard from are reducing the number of transitions the kids make back and forth. It seems like a helpful tip, especially if parents live far apart, and absolutely if they take public transportation back and forth.
So I think that if they can agree on that, that's fine. Sometimes parents won't be able to agree on that, and then I say to them that you need to just stay with the schedule as long as everybody is being safe. It's great if they can agree, but if they can't, then obviously it won't work. Also, sometimes it's just too long for a child to be away from the other parent. They may be very used to a routine, and this may be the only routine that they have left is this particular schedule of exchange. And if that's the case, then maybe they should be sticking to the schedule. So I hear you about that. I think it's a case-by-case situation. We've seen both, where people, as I said, are living together, okay, which is quite unusual when people have already divorced or going through divorce and have already physically separated. We have seen people change the schedule, and we have also seen that people are staying with the schedule. So we have seen both. It depends on really the child or children and what is in their best interest, and if you can come to an agreement. In my view, the order is there to prevent chaos. And so if there's an order and everybody doesn't agree, and it's not it's something that is not obviously unhealthy to follow, then everyone should be following the court orders.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lisa. Those are all the questions that we have. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today and asking some really good questions today. And I want to thank you, Lisa, for an excellent presentation. And we have Lisa's contact information here on the slide, and we will be sending this out as well if you don't have a chance to write it down. So thank you again so much, Lisa. It was really great and really helpful.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Everyone stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.